Hello and welcome back to our Semantics e-lecture series. If you may recall, in our previous lectures we discussed the levels of semantic analysis. We suggested that there were three levels: the word level, the sentence level, and the utterance level. In our previous lectures we discussed the word level. Now we begin with the sentence level. Under the sentence level we're going to discuss thematic roles and the difference between ambiguity and vagueness. Stay tuned. Alright, so in this lecture we're going to discuss thematic roles. More precisely, we can call them thematic roles. For more information about thematic roles, you can refer to John I. Said's Semantics, specifically Chapter 6. So what are thematic roles? Well, if you have some basic knowledge of syntax, you know that within a sentence, every phrase serves some constituent part of the sentence. So take, for example, John kicked the ball. Now if we were to think of basic syntax, John would be the subject, kicked would be the verb, and the ball would be the object. Now that is syntactically speaking. But what does semantics have to say about this? Semantics also gives each constituent part a role that it plays. So for example, John in this sentence is the agent of the action of kicking. The ball is the theme of the action of kicking. Now why is this necessary in the first place? Well, here's why. Let's flip the sentence around and make it a passive sentence. The ball is kicked by John. Notice how the ball serves as an object in this sentence, but in this sentence it functions as a subject. Now let's see what semantics has to say. In this sentence, it serves as the theme because it is the entity that undergoes the effect of the action. In this sentence as well, the ball still remains as the theme because it still is the thing affected by the action. So understanding these more stable semantic relations can also help to shed some light on how syntax works and how meaning works in general. So let's begin by identifying some basic thematic roles. An agent is the initiator of some action and is also capable of acting with volition. Volition means kind of like free and conscious will. In the sentence, John kicked the ball, John serves as the agent because John is the one that initiated or started the action of kicking, and John is an animate agent capable of making a decision to undertake or to start an action. That's what we mean by capable of acting with volition. If we were to say the rock fell on the boy, the rock here will not be an agent because the rock is missing two main things. It cannot be the initiator of an act because it's inanimate. And it also cannot act with volition because it's also inanimate. So that wraps up the agent. The second thematic role is the patient. The patient is the entity undergoing the effect of some action and often undergoing some change in state. For example, John pruned the trees. So the action here is pruned. John, of course, is the agent, we should know that by now, and the trees is the entity that is undergoing the effect of the action of pruning. And not only that, but it undergoes a change in state. So the trees were one way and now they are another way due to the action of pruning. So we call this a patient. The theme is the entity that is moved by the action or whose location is described. Mary threw the ball. Again, we should know by now that Mary is the agent, threw is the action. Now the ball is a theme here because when you throw a ball, the ball usually moves from one place to another. So a theme is the entity which is moved by the action or whose location is described. So when we say, for example, Mary hid the ball under the table. The ball here is also a theme because its location is described, which is under the table. So it's very important to keep in mind the difference between theme on the one hand and patient on the other. A thematic role, kind of similar to the agent, is the experiencer. The experiencer is the entity which is aware of the action or state described by the predicate, but which is not in control of the action or state. So if you really want to understand the experiencer role, try to find out what the difference is between the verb look and see. Here's an example. John looked at the moon. John saw the moon. And John looked at the moon. John is an agent because John is the initiator of the action of looking, and John undertook this action with volition. But in John saw the moon, John probably never intended to see the moon and probably didn't do it on purpose. He just saw the moon. And so John did not do this action of seeing on purpose and probably did not have any free will or choice in seeing or not seeing the moon. And so to differentiate this case from the case of John here, where it's an agent, we call this case an experiencer. So John is experiencing only. He's kind of like in the back seat. He's experiencing the beauty of the moon. Closely related is something called the percept or the stimulus, and this is the entity which is perceived or experienced by the experiencer. So John saw the moon. Now you should know by now that John here is an experiencer, not an agent, because you have to pay attention to the action here. The action here is saw, okay, or see. You don't see things on purpose. You look at things on purpose, and so John is an experiencer. The thing being experienced is called the percept or the stimulus. Mary feared the dark. So Mary here is experiencing fear. Now what caused this fear? What is the source or the stimulus of Mary feeling afraid? It was the dark. And so the dark is a percept or stimulus. Now the next role we're going to talk about is the beneficiary. The beneficiary is the entity for whose benefit the action was performed. So John bought Mary a car. So let's begin. Since buying is something you have to be very conscious about when doing, John is an agent. Bought is the action. A car could be seen as either a theme or as a patient. It really depends on whether you think the car is being moved from, say, the dealership to Mary, or if the car is being changed in its state as being, for example, unsold to being sold. This is actually one of the problems of thematic roles, which we will discuss later on. But now, who is this car bought for? This car is bought, of course, for Mary. She's the one that benefited from this deal. So she is the beneficiary. Alright? Closely related to the beneficiary is something called the recipient. Now the recipient is a subtype of another thematic role we're going to discuss in a minute called the goal, involved in actions describing changes of possession. Example, John sold the car to Mary. So then Mary here is the recipient of the car. Notice that this stays the same even if we change the sentence up a bit. So John sold Mary the car. Mary is still the recipient. Now let's talk about the goal. The goal is the entity towards which something moves. And this movement can either be literally or metaphorically. So we can say John walked to school. John is the agent, walked is the action, and the destination now, or the goal of John's trip or his walking action, is to get to the school. So the school is the goal. Now that's a bit different from our next one called location. Now the location is a place where something is situated or takes place. John hung the painting on the wall. On the wall is a location describing where the painting is situated. John saw the man at the library. At the library describes where the action took place, so it's also a location. Closely related to the goal is the source. So this is the entity from which, recall that the goal was to which something moves. And this again can either be literally or metaphorically. Recall our example sentence from goal, John walked to school. Simply changing this to John walked from school makes school become the source. This is the place from where John came. You can actually put both in the same sentence. John walked home from school. So the source is school. Now, where was John heading in his walking action? The goal was, of course, to get home. We can also talk about another thematic role called the instrument. The instrument is the means by which an action is performed or something comes about. John hit Bob with a stick. How did this hitting action take place? It happened by using an instrument, which was the stick. And that sums up all the thematic roles we're going to talk about in this class. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.